For a food hub, providing quality products to your customers begins at your receiving dock. But what does it actually look like? How do you determine what a quality product is? What do you do with the quality product once you've received it? What happens if it doesn't meet requirements? What are those requirements? How do you onboard vendors? All these things we're going to look at in this short video. This video is meant to be more of a checklist of considerations, things to think about, things to look at in your own receiving processes. It's not meant to be a comprehensive deep dive on any one thing or in all of the things. There are lots of resources out there that can speak to these things, and we'll talk about them as we get a little bit further into the video. Also, this video doesn't necessarily apply to a food hub that doesn't have a receiving process, such as like a virtual food hub or a food hub that is more just coordinating logistics. It's meant for food hubs that actually have a receiving process that are taking product in. So first, before product even arrives at the receiving door, it's important to consider who is even allowed to bring produce to the receiving door, right? What does your vendor onboarding process look like? Oftentimes, this will involve some sort of application, and at some point along the way, there's a member agreement or similar document that lists out here's all of our requirements. Here's what we're asking you to adhere to. It can include things like insurance requirements. If your end customers have any sort of requirements regarding certifications, whether that's organic certification, another set of characteristics, or a food safety certification, all those types of things are spelled out in that agreement, that vendor agreement. For produce safety specifically, those requirements can vary from asking for some sort of third party certification, whether that is a GAP certification through USDA or through another provider. In Michigan, you can also take advantage of the Produce Safety Risk Assessment Program that's used by a handful of different hubs that provides, another level of verification, but not quite a third party like certification. There's also some hubs will ask to see a copy of the food safety plan or to sign an affidavit that they have a food safety plan, they received food safety training. And those requirements can vary quite a bit because what your customers require can vary quite a bit. And that's where, when determining those requirements, that's where you should start. It should be, what are my customers asking for? Am I selling to a hospital that's requiring GAP certification? Okay, well, I have to ask that of my vendors now. And likewise, if nobody's asking for anything, well, what makes the most sense uh, for the scale of farms that I'm working with and all of that stuff. There are other food safety requirements such as packaging, whether if they're using reused boxes, making sure they're using single-use liners for those boxes. There could be temperature requirements. There can be sanitation requirements of like the making sure that produce is not transported with any other potentially contaminating products. Um, that anything that's iced is not dripping on something beneath it, that the delivery vehicles that they're being transported in are clean. All of those types of things should be taken into consideration. So once you've determined who can deliver product to your receiving door, once that product shows up, then what happens? Typically, first, there's some sort of inspection step. And it's important to keep in mind you want to make that inspection as least subjective as possible. You want to make it have a set of objective requirements that you're inspecting the product to. And those can range from, you have different quality requirements, such as making sure there's no damage from pests, no issues with spoilage, no issues with any other kinds of like weather damage or anything like that. And it's going to be up to the food hub to determine like what your threshold for that is. Some hubs may decide to accept more of that varied product because they have other places it can go, whether maybe you're connected to an incubator kitchen and you can take some of the stuff that maybe has a little bit of damage on it, maybe is a little bit bruised up, but it's totally fine for this one product that this one of your makers is making. Or if you're selling to a customer that is really strict on those types of things, then you might want to tighten those thresholds a bit. That's going to be determined by you, but it's important to determine them, right? Again, because you don't want that decision just to rest on, some person's shoulders. You want it to be able to be traced to some sort of objective criteria. Packaging is also important here, whether both in is the packaging appropriate for the product, and also Is the packaging like size and quantity what we've asked for in our vendor agreement, and also what we ordered? So verifying things to your purchase order too, and make sure that order is correct. From a food safety standpoint, the um, the pest damage can be important. Also, things like making sure that no product is dripping on another product. If something is iced, that's becoming less common, but still can turn up every once in a while, depending on the product and depending on the farm. And also temperature, if you have temperature requirements, making sure you're checking those with a properly calibrated thermometer. Oftentimes those laser ones are used, but you can use other ones too. And the bottom line here is you have to determine what is okay. So the person who is receiving the product at the receiving dock, at the receiving door, knows what's okay, and also knows what to do if something is not okay. So having those procedures written out ahead of time so that you're not having to make it a subjective decision every time. You have the criteria, you're just going through the process, and you're doing that every time. So how do you determine those requirements? Well, there's a few different places you can look for inspiration. One of them is the USDA grading standards. And some of those are a bit dated, but there is still a lot of good information in there. Another one is the Wholesale Success Manual. You can still find these online. Family Farmed is no longer in existence, but you can get them from the organization is called Good Food Catalyst now. You can still order those. There's still quite a few floating around the state as well. And it has a lot of really good information on what criteria you should be looking for each different produce item. And you can also just ask your customer, what do they want? What are they looking for? So once you've determined those requirements, it's important to make sure that all staff has been trained and that those requirements are documented and written down in some way, in some form, whether that's a checklist, whether that's a procedure that lists out different requirements, whether that is some other sort of visual aid, whether that's just printing off the grading standards or having the wholesale success manual back at the receiving door. Anything like that is fine. Just making sure that all staff knows what they are inspecting to. And that should also include not just what you're inspecting to, but how much of the product you're inspecting. Are you peeking in every single box in a shipment? Are you picking one box out of a lot? A lot of that's going to depend on the volume of product that's coming in and how frequently it's coming in. But just determining how much of the product you need to inspect as well. So here's an example of what one of those inspection sheets can look like. It has the crops listed, it has visual examples of what is acceptable and what's unacceptable. It has criteria to look for. It has the packaging requirements, and it also has some different scenarios for when the delivery should be rejected. So let's go a little bit deeper on food safety. One of the most important things with food safety when it comes to a food hub is traceability. So traceability means that you know where product is coming from, where a certain lot of product is coming from, and where that product went once it left your facility. So most commonly, this is done through a lot code, right? The farm, when it packages the produce, puts a lot code on the packaging that has certain information on it, and that lot code follows the product all the way through to your end customer. And that lot code is documented in some way. So on a receiving log, you have the lot code and the quantities of either boxes or by pounds or whatever. And then that lot code stays on the product when it's in the cooler. And then the lot code is written on an invoice or in some sort of software platform. It's recorded where that product went. And the important thing and the way to test this system is through a mock recall, right? So that is picking at random a product, a lot that has been shipped to a customer, and verifying that you can account for all of the product in your system. So you can trace it all the way back to what farm it came from, what vendor it came from. You can then also say, where else did this product go once it left our facility? So when thinking about traceability, keep in mind, how are we documenting this? Where are we recording this information? And how can we easily retrieve that information when we need to and make sure that we're accounting for all of it? The scenario you do not want is to know we had 35 boxes of this product that came in 2 weeks ago, and all of it is gone, but we can only account for 16 boxes. You want to make sure that if you had 35 boxes going in, you can look in your system and see where all 35 of those boxes went. And this also includes shrink, right? If you have to toss a box out for some reason, making sure that that is documented somewhere. This becomes more complicated if you were doing any type of repacking. So if you are receiving product in bulk, packaging it in boxes and shipping it out to customers, you need to still make sure that you can trace that thread all the way through your operation, and all of that bulk product is accounted for in all of the boxes you shipped out. Other things to consider when it comes to food safety within your own operation are things like worker health and hygiene, making sure nobody's handling produce if they're sick. People are washing hands. People are not wearing dirty clothing or aprons or whatever when they're handling produce, things like that. Things like the sanitation of the facility itself, making sure it's clean and tidy, that any produce contact surfaces are clean and sanitized before use, that coolers and storage areas are being cleaned regularly, that pests are being monitored for and controlled, and making sure that you have proper procedures and record keeping practices in place. Again, we're trying to remove subjectivity. It shouldn't be anybody's judgment call. You should have a documented procedure that says this is how we do this. This is when we clean these things. We have record keeping logs that say this is when product came in, or a software platform that's capturing that information. So again, this video is not meant to be a comprehensive, here are all the things you have to do. It's meant to be more of just a, here's everything you need to be considering when you're thinking about your receiving process and how you're building up your receiving process. Because again, good quality product going to your customers begins at the receiving door.